This week on the show, Luminosity win ELEAGUE Group A, Group B gets underway, and LG and SK Gaming come to blows. I'm Jack Westerman, joined by John Blue Mullen, and you're watching the penultimate episode of PopFlash. Our first story this week is ELEAGUE Group A, which played out over the course of Tuesday to Friday last week. Now, ELEAGUE, of course, is currently the biggest Counter-Strike tournament ever held. There's $1.4 million up for grabs. Prize pool is about $390,000 for first place and paying out right down to 24th place. Now, Blue, this is kind of a weird format we've got. The groups are kind of divided into, we play round robin, then we play a playoff bracket within the group, and one team emerges as winner. The second place team goes through to a lower or a last chance qualifier, I think, which happens after all the groups have played. Confusing format. However, last week Group A played entirety. This week we're in Group B, so we'll talk about that in a little while. First of all, though, let's get Group A up on the screen. This was Luminosity, Cloud9, Renegades, and Team Liquid. And I don't think it's a surprise to see that Luminosity won this group in... this was the round robin stage. So they won the round robin 6-0, but then did indeed go on to win the group in the playoff bracket as well. One thing I don't think we expected to see here in the round robin is Team Liquid going 0 for 6, Blue. Mo was kind of the opinion on the analyst desk that these guys should just call it a day and disband as a roster at this point. Are you in agreement?
I don't know about a full disbandment exactly, but clearly it has reached a tipping point as far as the frustration is concerned, especially on Hiko's end of things. You could finally tell now that he's very visually and very upfront, very publicly frustrated, as it would seem, with the current status of the roster for Team Liquid.
Yeah.
So considering that, it would seem like changes are definitely abound. Overall, the team did look very uncoordinated, sort of like a mess there. I wouldn't say it's necessarily any one player's fault, but just the fact that they're not making any progress whatsoever in recent months, combined with the drama of Simple, it's just caused an overall mess on this team, unfortunately. So I don't think the entire team's going to break apart, but I do think some big changes may be coming in the future because of their poor performance here.
And what about Renegades while we're on this round robin? So these guys finished 3 for 3, minus 14 round difference. However, they did have a pretty good first map against Luminosity. I think we alluded to it last week when I think they just finished playing when we went live. It's been a long time since we saw these guys regularly attending international events. How do you feel they fared in this outing in ELEAGUE here?
Well, they've been, as I understand it, they've been practicing quite heavily over in Europe at like a boot camp or something there. So definitely trying to up their own game as far as their commitment is concerned to some of this. And now the real question is going to be, can we see this continue to other events? Because obviously they still go out here. We're not going to see them again for the rest of ELEAGUE, but they still have other events coming up, I would assume, within the next coming couple of weeks here. So the big question for me is going to be, how do we see them perform at those events? Of course, do we see that performance being consistent, or was, like many teams, this sort of just a one-off thing?
Yeah, and just to pick on one player in particular, and I'm sorry to do this to him, but Sponge had an abysmal tournament. He was the worst rated player in the entire group. Do you think that's more to do with him playing poorly, or the team not really succeeding? You know, sometimes it's hard for a player to succeed in a struggling team, right? Which is it in this case?
I'm going to be completely honest. I don't think we've ever really seen Sponge do anything like that substantial as far as his own individual performance in games. Granted, he takes on the IGL role, so we don't really expect that, but it can't get to a point where, I mean, things are being played almost like 4v5 in certain cases there, and I wouldn't say it's definitely that bad, but to be completely honest, yeah, like Sponge's own individual performance has never really been that impressive for me, so the fact that he's, once again, sort of at the bottom of the totem pole is not surprising at all.
All right, okay, let's leave the round robin stage there. The other two teams are Luminosity and Cloud9, so we'll come back to them in just a second. As we have a look at the Group A playoffs now, so this was Luminosity versus Liquid. Again, Luminosity beat Liquid 2-0, which I think meant Liquid finished this tournament 0 for 8. Good showing for those guys. Cloud9 saw off Renegades 2-0, and then in the grand final, Luminosity saw off Cloud9, beat Cloud9 2-1. However, Cloud9 put up a pretty good fight, Blue. They won that first map on Mirage? Cobble?
Mirage, they won.
Mirage, and then Cobble,
Yeah.
They went to overtime, correct?
I believe so. It was the first map was pretty close, and then I'm trying to remember exactly. I was actually watching for Buffalo Wild Wings. We were watching it like on a really tiny screen, so it wasn't very easy to keep up with all the details.
How are the other guys in Arby's? Oh, sorry, it wasn't Arby's.
Arby's. Buffalo Wild Wings was the restaurant. Arby's is a fast food place.
Sure. Okay.
I don't think you'd want to go down there for sit-down dinner. Might not be too enjoyable.
But I guess just really as a side note, then how are the public responding to seeing esports on TV in a wings restaurant?
It seems like if you look at like Reddit and whatnot, there's some very mixed perceptions. Like
Yeah,
some
I saw.
restaurants would outright not show it because it's a violent video game. Ours was pretty receptive to it. They were a bit confused at first, which I guess was understandable since I think they're franchises. So like each restaurant is owned individually, if I remember that correctly.
Yeah.
And then they just get like memos from headquarters every once in a while. So they were a bit confused at first, but then we showed it to them whatnot and sort of explained it. And the manager and a couple of waitresses were like, "Wow, this is really interesting." So it was cool. We were sort of tucked away in a corner of the restaurant, so we didn't see like the actual like public reception, but it was
Right.
from the staffing part of it. It was still pretty cool. And he as well that they're probably going to put it on like bigger screens for next week since apparently a bunch of people came to see it at our restaurant.
I
It
guess
was cool.
Yeah, pretty popular in that case, at least in the wings restaurants of the
Yeah.
States. Just very quickly on Cloud9. Sorry, go on.
Decent amount of ESL employees at that restaurant, of course. That probably made up for a pretty good portion of it. But
Sure. I mean, you guys, you're in California, right? So
yeah,
big ESL contingent. Just back on Luminosity and Cloud9 very quickly then. So was this... I mean, surely... So the Cloud9 won that first map. They went to overtime in the second map. This was such a good chance for them to take it, especially with you guys watching in California and giving them home soil love, right?
yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest people that try to drive that performance home, it was two players in my mind. Stewie throughout the entire tournament was actually very impressive, and this is becoming a consistent thing now with Stewie, where it's not just like a one-off event where he shows up and is like, wow, it's really impressive. That was sort of his case at Austin, and we sort of shy off just a little bit back over at the Pro League finals. But once we actually came to this event too, he was still performing extremely well, and another player really stepped up to the plate. Specifically on that first map on Mirage, it was nothing. He went like 33 and 18 at 115 ADR, a 1.83 player rating. It was off the chart. So those two had some good stuff. Unfortunately, when we look at the somewhat lackluster performances coming in from the rest of the guys, that fell off big time. Especially I think on the third map specifically. I'm trying to check this in front of me now, but yeah, like players like Shroud and whatnot, once they got over towards Dust 2, we just really did not see that much of them at all, and that's where they dropped off the map pretty quickly. It seemed like they sort of just ran out of steam by map number 3, which was a bit strange. The map veto itself did confuse me a little bit. The fact that we saw it go to Dust 2, which is a map that Luminosity only recently added to their map pool, and C9 has been fairly good at on the past, at least in domestic matchups. So when they played it there versus them, I was expecting a very large possibility for Cloud9 to steal away the third map, and it ended up being the opposite. They just get destroyed by Luminosity, unfortunately, and I think it's mainly just because they ran out of steam after the two very close first maps that were played.
Yeah. So I guess the take-home message for this group is Luminosity still looking pretty hot.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Okay, Blue, let's leave Group A there, and we'll jump down to Group B now. So, again, same caveat as last week, guys. Group B, because of the strange timing of ELEAGUE, they start on a Tuesday, finish on a Friday, I think. They're currently playing Group B right now. We may talk about some of the results that have already happened, but, you know, it's hard for us to speculate about stuff that hasn't. So, as the standings appear on screen, this is the group with Ninjas in Pyjamas, G2, Optic, and Selfless. So, let's start with NiP, Blue. They've been playing pretty well as of late. They won DreamHack Malmö and reached the semi-finals of Pro League, which was 2-3 weeks ago now. Geralt and Forest, we've seen a resurgence from those two guys. What does the future hold for NiP? What does this tournament hold for NiP? This group in particular.
Well, that's gonna be the interesting question because, like, as we're recording this right now, G2 have already taken the first map off of them, and so with that being said, at least for this group, there is a strong chance, in my mind at least, especially considering the rocketing, I guess, would be a good adjective to try and use in this case. The rocketed performance from, probably not even a real word, from G2 that we saw back at Pro League, it seemed to all of a sudden elevate this team to another level, and they seem to be performing great. So I think NiP is going to show up strong. I think that G2 is going to show up just a little bit stronger, specifically at this event. NiP is going to have to wait, I think, a little bit longer for their time in the sun, at least in the ELEAGUE.
Yeah, G2 have been on a resurgence. I don't know about the word rocketed. Let's go with that.
It's probably not a real word. I make up words a lot.
They've been rocketing upwards, certainly. And a lot of people who've been attributing that to Shox and Scream, who are finally kind of back on the horse. They both kind of had swings and peaks over the last year or two. How much of G2's success is down to these star players stepping back up to the plate, do you think?
Oh, a lot of it, absolutely. But I mean, to be completely honest, a lot of them are stepping up to the plate. RPK is another player too that I feel like he's he's been a somewhat consistent guy in the past, but he's another guy that's definitely bringing that consistency to the table, along with the fact that we're still seeing Shocks and Scream step up once again. So those three in itself are just making for like a whole new G2, a very powerful duo that all of a sudden seems to be dominating a lot of players and is making them seem like the best French squad at the moment over Envious.
Yeah, well, it's hard to argue against that, right?
Yeah.
And so the other two teams in this group, very quickly, Optic and Selfless. So the predominantly Canadian roster and the US one. Optic kind of coming to this, they got a big win against Astralis at the ESL Pro League finals. They won the MLG American qualifier. How are we feeling about Optic in this group? Is this sheep wandering into the wolves' den, or do they have a shot of qualifying here?
Yeah, I mean, if G2 were still like pre-Pro League G2, where it was like they were looking very weak, very inconsistent with their performance, and they didn't like just show up and rock the entire show completely, then I would definitely say that there was a decent chance that Optic, or even Selfless to a certain degree, could try and steal second place in this group in an upset against G2. However, ultimately now, with the strong performances in the past couple of months from both NIP and now G2, I don't think that either of these two teams has a chance to sneak through. There's been some good triumphs for Optic in the past, like you said, the upset versus Astralis, them taking the winner of the minor over Tempo Storm, which is going to give them the higher seed in the major qualifiers coming up in a couple of weeks. I still don't think that's going to be enough to come out on top of either NIP or G2, especially if it comes down to a best of 3.
All right, Blue. And last question, very quickly before we leave this topic. ELEAGUE, we've seen 1 week of it now. I think reception seems to be positive for it. Well, I mean, we should caveat that coming into ELEAGUE, there was a league in 2008 or 2009 called the CGS, which tried to do exactly the same as ELEAGUE. They tried to put Counter-Strike on TV, didn't go so well. After 1 week of ELEAGUE, well, 1.5 weeks, we're in the middle of week 2, Reddit seems to be in love with it. The viewing figures, not so great. I think they were down to like a third of TBS's regular viewership, right? But how do you feel about ELEAGUE as a concept? Are we tentatively positive, do you think?
I mean, so here's the thing. Based on what we've seen said publicly, ELEAGUE was not really looking for like amazing viewership, especially on the TV market off of the first. I think they may be expecting a little bit more through just Twitch itself. In the first couple of weeks here, but regardless of that, I mean, this is Turner that owns this, and keep in mind just how big Turner is in the grand scheme of things. They can afford to lose this kind of money, especially if they're in this for the longer run of this one. From what's been said, it looks like they're not really looking to get like mass ratings here. This is a building season for them to get the approval of the current esports community and then build on TVs from there. So I don't think that like viewer numbers is going to be that big of a disappointment for like those that are looking outward and say like, oh, it had terrible viewer numbers for the first week. It's going to be a complete failure. I guess you can say that, but I don't really think that was their goal in the first week, was to get this massive amount of viewer numbers. I think they're looking to slowly build it from Twitch, try to bring people over to cable, and then build on an audience that's already outside of esports from that point forward, and then try to get more and more people interested in it.
At the risk of playing devil's advocate, this is exactly what people said back in 2008, because that was DirecTV that was backing the CGS, and people said the exact same things. Look at how big DirecTV is. They can afford to lose this kind of money. As it turned out, they couldn't. 2 seasons in, they pulled the plug. I guess what makes this different? Why are we so sure that Turner's not going to pull the plug as well?
Well, for one, when you look at just the channel exposure in general, like DirecTV's 101 channel is kind of a joke in terms of broadcast entertainment. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things at all. So I feel like DirecTV were just fishing for anything to try and bring in viewers to that channel, and it didn't work out. So they dump it and they go on to the next thing. That happens so often with DirecTV's own independent programming that I don't think that's anything to compare it to, compared to Turner, who has a much bigger possible audience and whatnot to bring it to, and they seem to have a lot more integrity when it comes to their shows. They've already shown, just with the way that they're producing this, that they want so this has been said many other times, but it's not like they want esports really bad at putting my words together today. I do apologize. It's not like they want to like just turn esports. They don't want to demonize it into this thing that works for TV. They want to bring esports to TV in its current natural form. And I think that's the biggest thing that at the very least will give it acceptance among the community, and then hopefully allow it to grow from there. The viewership numbers on TV is definitely still going to be a big factor of it, I feel, at the end of the day, but hopefully they're going to have enough confidence in it to let it run for at least one more season after this one, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Last but not least, I've got some quickfire questions for you, Blue. So, quick as you can, give me your thoughts on the following news stories from the week. First of all, there was a little bit of controversy this week between Luminosity Gaming and SK Gaming.
Yeah, a little bit's underscoring it. It was quite a big bump in the road as far as Drama Street is concerned this week in the CS community. As obviously it seems like, just from looking at it on a very quick outsider's glance, that SK did have intentions to now take control of the LG roster, but obviously either LG wanted to back out or something else went wrong, and now a whole bunch of hubbub has been started over it, and the fact that now all of a sudden they seem to have backed out of these contracts, but according to SK, they've already signed it. They've signed like letters of intent or something like that, and they've already committed to joining this team, but LG's trying to say they haven't. So it's a pretty big battle, and for LG, I mean, if they end up losing this, they lose the roster, that could mean some very bad things for Luminosity overall, because as far as I'm aware, this is like their only big team, and if they end up losing this squad for whatever reason, I don't want to put my opinions out there too much, but if they end up losing this squad, I feel like that could mean some very, very bad things for the LG organization within the next like year or two, because of the fact that they don't really have any like high class teams like within the top, very, very tippity top of their game beyond the Brazilian squad here in CS.
Whose side are you on?
I haven't actually looked at all the details, so I haven't been able to analyze it like so much, but I feel like, just off of a very quick glance at this one, I feel like SK does have a slight advantage over LG just in terms of the legal ground on it. But it's such muddy waters as far as trying to figure out who exactly is running it, that it's hard to actually decipher that properly.
Politics. All right, last story this week is NRG signing Fugly and Tabson.
Yeah, I feel like I was actually a bit surprised to see them dropping Silent. Well, I mean, like, not so surprised, but it did sort of come out of nowhere, it would seem, with Silent along with Justin being dropped. Justin particularly was a bit more of a surprise to me, considering his performances weren't bad from an individual basis over the past couple of months. Silent had never really stepped up to the plate as far as bringing like a big performance to the team, so I can understand that one. But Justin was a bit more of a surprise. However, bringing Fugly in, obviously, I think he brings a little bit more experience from a North American perspective on the overall scope of things. And Tabson, we already saw him doing very well when he had to fill in for Peter back at the game show land, and he did a fantastic job there. I'm sure he has connections to GOB, and they've played a lot in the past together as well. So bringing those guys in together, I feel like is going to be an easy connection for GOB to just try and add a bit more firepower to the roster. It should work out great overall, in my opinion.
That's it for this week. I'm Jack Westerman, joined by John Blue Mullen.
We'll be back next Wednesday with the final episode of PopFlash.